people with fleets, because there are relatively few of those vehicles on the streets in the hands of private individuals. It's more fleet use. There you can put a fueling installation right on site to where these vehicles come and go on a daily basis. On the street itself, there's not very much of that available, and it's simply a matter of economics. There are so few vehicles on the street making retail purchases that there just aren't very many sites like that available yet. Now, as the market changes, we're going to meet whatever fuels requirements are out there. But just as an example, a car running on CNG, compressed natural gas, to put in a fueling operation for CNG is about $200,000 to $250,000. You got to have a lot of cars pulling in, buying CNG to make that ever a viable economic option. So, but if you do have the fleet use, again, where it can go in and put it right in that home base, if you would, then it can be done fairly easily.
Okay. Yes, Representative Rice.
Oh,
Chairman, 22.
One of the problems with gasoline prices has been the transmission of blended fuels through the pipelines, and the cost of starting and stopping and blending different fuels and so on and so forth. And where ethanol has been used, my understanding is that the price has risen to be virtually the same as gasoline prices.
it's correct.
Or in higher in some cases. How would your organization at BP be able to accommodate another blending of fuels from a transmission standpoint and then at the pump?
Well, that is precisely the concern we would have. That's one of the reasons why we generally oppose any mandated programs, because it creates that need that must be filled regardless of how many vehicles there may be in that regard. Ethanol, yes, we have to transport it separately because it cannot be shipped through a pipeline. Ethanol has an affinity for water, meaning it absorbs the water, and you get water in pipelines with condensation, etc. So we have to blend it at the terminal. Getting the base fuel for blending is not a big problem. That comes across the pipeline. Once again, depending on the fuel that any hybrid uses, you have to reach a critical mass point before you can possibly accommodate it. And just for the sake of discussion, let's say there was 2,000 of these vehicles around Georgia. We can't operate a facility for 2,000 vehicles spread across this state that might come in sometime if they were in Atlanta. You can't do it. One of the things, for example, we're looking at is a program which we have up on stream now that we're going into with DuPont, and we're going to be manufacturing a product called biobutanol, which looks like an ethanol, is compatible with an ethanol, but it has other qualities to it that give you, frankly, a little better performance, and it can be shipped through a pipeline. It does not have that affinity for water. It will, in some cases, compete with an ethanol, but it is compatible with it at the same time. And so we've gone into a pretty sizable project with them on this product. That, again, addresses this issue of what kind of fuels are you going to have. It's, again, we got to come back to something which works in vehicles and that you can anticipate a fairly high demand for.
Follow-up question. The butanol solution is combustible in the same capability
Absolutely.
engine as an ethanol or gas.
Absolutely.
That type of situation. So if I understand you right in terms of the ability to supply alternative fuels, with any kind of an aggressive buy situation. These really are basically commutation cars in large areas. I would guess for the average buyer,
I would think
which is what
so.
you're trying to get to. I mean, you're trying to get the fleets and so on, but
Yeah.
You point out that they have their own solutions in terms of where they gas and that type of thing. So in Atlanta, I mean, I'm just thinking about the implementation of this. Suppose we do this, and suppose it's effective on a particular date, you know, I'm wondering about the ability to provide that fuel at locations that is going to be consistent with the commutation pattern that you find in the metro area.
Well, that again, Mr. Chairman, is the problem, is how many are there going to be? Where are they going to be? You have the other problem of even if they're all, you know, commuters in Atlanta, but if I've got, just as an example, 2 sites, I've got one in Lawrenceville and one in Marietta, how convenient for that is it for motorists? It's not, truthfully. And so the fuel will follow the vehicle, and where the vehicles are when it reaches a critical mass point, then somebody will put in that fueling facility. And I think a perfect example of that is diesel engine vehicles, where in the 70s we had so many come on stream, and many service stations carried diesel in addition to regular gasoline. And today, you got to look for one. You got to look for one.
Thank you.
Sure.
Representative
Yes, sir.
Williams.
Mike, on the
Chairman.
environmental side, looking at the emission standards, do you see any problem with these alternative fuels failure to meet the emission standards that you set up?
Most of them are very efficient from that standpoint. I mean, they've been engineered that way. You can't come out with a new vehicle and say, wow, this is wonderful. Oh, the pollution just went up 30% from this vehicle. It won't fly today in today's automotive. But, you know, again, I think some of the fellows from the manufacturers could perhaps address that a little better than I can.
I have one
Representative Craig.
question.
Sure, Tom.
Where Chairman Williams and I live in northwest Georgia, we're sort of on a boundary of the non-attainment zone. I think we're talking about fuel prices here. It might help the panel here to understand that there are different fuel prices throughout the state depending on where you live based on the cost of the fuel.
Sure.
In Morgan County, where I live, we fall into the non-attainment area. In Whitfield County, where Chairman Williams lives, they are not in that area. And I can drive a few miles north and get fuel 12 cents cheaper a gallon, and it's just because I'm crossing an imaginary boundary. Can you explain why that is and how we can?
Well, the boundary for us is not imaginary. It's very real. We have in Georgia a 45-county area around Metro Atlanta, which was designated by Georgia EPD in conjunction with the U.S. EPA. In order to try and reach air attainment status, we have worked with both of those groups, EPD and EPA, to get them fuel which is about as low in emissions as possible. What Georgia finally adopted for the 45-county metro area, and the reason they went to 45 counties is because they had to keep stepping out. I mean, it originally started with 4 counties, went to 13, went to 25, went to 43, is to try and capture enough vehicles and enough emissions to get them the credits that they needed. We wound up with a fuel here on a year-round basis that's no more than 30 parts per million sulfur, which is very low. And then in the summertime, we have to have what's called a Reid vapor pressure. That's the number at which the fuel begins to evaporate. The lower you make that number, the less evaporation you have, but that also gets very expensive to produce. So within that 45 county area, again, we're required, that's not a choice on our part, we're required to provide that fuel, and it's more expensive than the others. Now, when you get to the street price, that's a factor which has to be accommodated. And then, where is all the competition, where people are? Sometimes you're recovering costs in other places where you weren't originally required to, but it's because of where the market conditions go. But it was our estimate that it was going to be in the neighborhood of 5 to 8 cents a gallon more to produce that fuel over conventional fuel than what you could buy in a Whitfield County, for example, what we supply there. And that's just a matter of reaching the attainment numbers which the state was required to do under EPA mandates.
Has it made a difference?
Oh, a big difference, huge difference. The amount of pollution emitted has been dramatically reduced, tons upon tons. I couldn't give you the exact numbers, but yes, it's been very effective. But, it comes at a price, which you guys see.
So,
Go ahead.
so the best alternative here from an environmental standpoint is a combination electric gasoline-powered car, but the gasoline's ethanol from an environmental standpoint.
The higher the ethanol, ethanol has its emissions. You'll get a little more emissions in VOCs with ethanol than you do with gasoline. The question is going to become here exactly which one, and I think the thing you need to avoid is necessarily only this one, because I think it's going to take a combination of different kinds of fuels. And don't forget, the fuel composition changes during the year. The RVP, which I mentioned, very low in the summertime. In the wintertime, that goes up. If you had cars with 7.0 RVP or gasoline with 7.0 RVP, and you had it up in Representative Williams' region in the wintertime, you'd have a whole lot of cars that are not going to run. They would stall out. So the RVP has to go up, meaning it raises that evaporative quality to be able to ignite in that engine.
A lot of good information. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Next, we have Neil Parker, signed up from Bug Busters.
Good morning. My name is Neil Parker. I am a small fleet operator that Calvin invited to come today. I have a fleet of approximately 65 vehicles. On an annual basis, we purchase approximately 15 to 20 new vehicles a year as we continue to grow our business. Like most consumers, we've been dramatically affected by the increased cost of fuel. The problem that we've incurred in our small fleets, and I started looking at the gas electric vehicles 2 to 3 years ago and ran the numbers, and it just wasn't feasible. We've got, I think, 10 Ford Focuses right now in our fleet for our management. And I looked at the Toyota Prius, and my choice was the Toyota Prius until I ran the numbers, and it just wasn't viable to pay the additional cost for the Prius or to save the economy or the environment with the Prius. I mean, the Focuses were getting relatively good mileage at a considerable lower price for what I would consider a comparable vehicle. I wanted to buy the Priuses, but it just wasn't viable, even with the federal tax credit. So if the state institutes a tax credit, I think that's fine. If your concern is about somebody flipping the car, I contend that if they do flip the car is probably going to stay in Georgia anyway. And I don't think somebody's going to flip a car in Georgia and send it to Michigan or something of that nature. So the benefits to the state would still be here. I don't think you're going to have wholesale flipping. A number of people who I know have purchased the gas electric vehicles and are very pleased with them. I'm sure that the people from Toyota and Ford will be able to tell me the life of the battery, which I have not been able to find from a dealer yet, or the replacement cost of the battery. Typically, we run our vehicles approximately 200,000 miles, which is about a 4 to 5 year life for us before we cycle the vehicles. And my concern is what is the replacement cost of the battery and what is the life of the battery. I've had prices from $500 to $5,000 from Toyota dealerships, and that's another factor for somebody who is in the fleet business. And also, fleet vehicles so far have not been made available for the service industry. We typically run Ford Rangers, Ford F-150s, and things of that nature in our industry. There are 21,000 pest control operators in the United States, of which there's about 1,800 in the state of Georgia. And that's just a small industry. But I would venture to say that of those 1,800, there's probably 5,000 pest control service vehicles that do regular service in the state of Georgia. There are no vehicles that are available for us at the present time that are gas electric hybrids or anything other than a Ford Ranger or a little Toyota pickup or a little Chevrolet pickup. And those vehicles, we are finding that the market seems to be for the higher end vehicles. Chevrolet does have I believe their Silverado deluxe vehicle offered as a hybrid. Ford is offering the Escape as a hybrid, to my knowledge. But for a service vehicle, and there are a lot more service vehicles that are running a lot of mileage, more so than the general consumer. I mean, typically my vehicles run 40,000 miles a year, and there are not many people who. My wife's vehicle runs. Let's see, she's got a 3-year-old vehicle with 19,000 miles on it. And my service vehicles run 40,000 miles a year. So, it seems to me that the market would be for the service vehicles where the greatest benefit and where the greatest pollution is coming back to the state, because we do the stop and go driving. And so I think if we could get the manufacturers to focus more on the service industry, and also the possibility of the tax benefit, because we're certainly not flipping our vehicles. And I'm open to any questions you might have.
Yeah. Well, that's some good information. I hope the manufacturers also hear that, because it sounds like it is a potentially huge market for them. Chairman Rice.
Yeah, you say you ran the numbers. I'm not sure how you run the numbers without knowing the replacement cost of the battery, but
yeah,
you must have estimated that somehow.
Well,
but you made a decision not to do it.
Yeah.
So what would the tax credit have to be to have made a difference?
Well, the federal tax credit, my understanding of the federal tax credit when it first came out was $2,000. Okay. But I was looking, and that's what I was informed of at the time. It was a $2,000 credit. The additional cost of the vehicle was nearly $7,000. Okay, you're going to have some fuel savings, but you'd have to keep the car almost 300,000 miles to be at a break even. Mm-hmm. And the battery was in that mix that I couldn't assign a value to the battery at that time. I had dealers that told me 500, and then I had a dealer say, well, it may be as much as 5,000. We don't know yet. And this was 2 or 3 years ago when they were first coming out. And then the availability of the vehicles too. They were, you didn't know what color they were going to be. You just put your name on the list and hoped whatever, when one came in, you took it at that time, because there was such a high demand for the vehicles.
How many miles did you peg the battery to last?
About 100,000. Now, that's what the dealers told me at the time. I didn't have any other information other than that,
So you'd be replacing it once.
at least, or maybe more often.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So you got the added price of the vehicle plus the battery, in your particular case. Plus
Correct.
the battery replacement and the service life of the vehicle.
Correct. So, and I am sure by now, and this has been about 3 years, they have replaced some batteries, and I'm sure there's an assigned price, but I haven't looked at it recently. But if the federal tax credit, from my understanding now, has diminished as the manufacturers have made more, I think it's the federal tax credit, from what I've heard recently, is on a sliding scale based on the number of units that the manufacturer produces. Now, that may not be total correct information. I'm sure somebody here has better information than that. But it originally was a $2,000 credit 2 or 3 years ago. And I was looking at about a $7,000 spread on the vehicle. A savings on fuel, but to get to the savings on fuel, and that was back when gas was around $2.75. Now that it's closer to $3, it gets closer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
As a follow-up on that, on my own, in your opinion, what should our target be for a break-even on mileage? 100,000, 150?
I would think somewhere in that
Somewhere.
neighborhood.
And then that, again, would
Yeah.
reduce flipping because you wouldn't get your full advantage because
Right.
part of your advantage would be in your fuel savings over a period of time.
I mean, I was in Italy earlier this year, and I looked at Vespa makes a little three-wheel scooter that's now approved for the United States for a service vehicle that carries 1,000 pounds in the back, but the vehicle wasn't available with air conditioning, nor was it available with heat, And I said, well, I can't put my people out in a vehicle without air conditioning and heat, but it got 90 miles to the gallon because they're paying $6, equivalent to $6 or $7 a gallon for fuel. I will also tell you that in Florence, if you don't live in the city of Florence, you can't bring a vehicle inside that city. Everybody's riding scooters because it's $6, $7 a gallon equivalent. They're buying in liters, but there's thousands of motor scooters when you go into the city of Florence because everybody, if you don't live there, it's like a $1,000 fine if you bring a vehicle inside there without the permit to live in that city. And I'd hate to see Atlanta get to that point and see everybody on the interstate on motor scooters.
That'd be crazy.
But, when we get to $7 a gallon and higher pollution, we may all be on Vespa motor scooters.
Oh, excuse me, Neil.
Yeah.
Did you have a question? Representative Selton.
I did. Just, and you may not be the best equipped person to answer this, but what's your understanding for if you had a vehicle that was non-hybrid versus a vehicle that had hybrid technology in it, same weight, comparable horsepower, what would the mileage savings be, or the percentage mile per gallon savings be? Do you have
I can tell you that I get approximately 28 to 29 miles per gallon out of a Ford Focus, and a Toyota Prius is supposed to be somewhere in the 50s.
I guess the question I'm asking...
So that's where I factored the fuel difference.
And it may be more appropriate for a Ford Escape that's hybrid versus not hybrid. I mean, can you...
Now, a Ford Escape is somewhere closer to what I understand in the 30s. It's not that much better than a comparable gas vehicle. The Honda and the Prius had the best gas mileage. The Escape that I looked at earlier this year was just in the 30s, and the 30s is not enough to make a switch over. Somebody who's buying an Escape, in my opinion, and Ford people may be here, but they're buying it just to be environmentally friendly because you can get a comparable vehicle. You're not saving that much on an Escape.
And I asked a question because I'm sensitive to what you said about the service industry. Our engineering business, our technicians that are carrying concrete cores around the city of Atlanta for construction projects, drive Ford F-150 pickup trucks. If we were to get a hybrid fleet of Ford F-150s at some time in the future, we have a pretty clearly defined need for capacity in those trucks.
Sure.
We couldn't just say take a Prius out and
No.
carry your concrete cores around. So
No.
Given that, I think part of this would be getting an understanding and being able to quantify the payoff Ford F-150 hybrid versus Ford F-150 conventional.
Right.
I'd need to get a feel for that, I think. As well.
Right.
Thank you very much. And I think some of the manufacturers or automotive people might follow up, because it really depends upon the usage of the vehicle. Again, if you're doing stop and go where it's on electric much of the time versus the federal formula, which you're utilizing, you'll have totally different results. And we'll see. Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony, Neil. Dan Gentry. Would you like to make some comments?
Interested observer, so don't have any.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan. And Bill Morey from the Georgia Automobile Dealers Association. Do you have any comments? Okay. Thank you so much. Bob Cucci from Ford. And we've been joined by Representative Jay Roberts, who's here with us. Thank you very much for being here, sir.
Well, good morning. I am Bob Cucci, Regional Director for Governmental Affairs for Ford. I may not have all the technical data that you are looking for, but I can give you some ideas about this subject. And I noticed we moved a little bit away from hybrids to alternative fuels, and obviously they're different subjects, but they are related. So I'll try to deal with the hybrids first and go on. I just wanted to make sure that I thank the person who's still buying Ford vehicles. At least somebody is, and we appreciate it. I appreciate it. One thing I might mention right at the beginning is we were at a number of us were at the Southern Legislative Conference, and in one of the sessions, we did in fact hear from a Robert Bauman, who is director of R&D, Research and Development, the Center for Energy Studies at Louisiana State University. And the message that I took away was from his presentation, which I think was really excellent, was there is no silver bullet to our situation with regard to fuel, with regard to dependency, the whole issue of fuel economy, cost of petroleum, whatever. There's room for everyone under the tent. That means we need it all. We can't just go for one specific solution. We need many solutions. And so that, I think what Mike Kumpf was saying is probably true. And that's important to point out that there may be a role for a number of fuels, and it's our job as manufacturers to try and bring those vehicles out. And as you know, you may have heard that the President and the Congress has met with the heads of the auto companies. And we've committed to put out over 1 million new flex fuel vehicles this year, just the what we used to call the big three here in the United States, and so we are going to be making those fuels available, and by that we mean flex fuel vehicles that can run on gasoline and ethanol in a blend. I was impressed that the chairman had some data about vehicles that are in fact already on the roads here in Georgia. For a number of years, most of you know that our plant here in Hapeville produced a Taurus that was a flex fuel vehicle. And unfortunately, there wasn't any fuel other than gasoline to run that vehicle on, unless there was a fleet, as Mike mentioned, where these vehicles had the ability to gas up. But I'm not sure even today that there are that many stations in Georgia that perhaps even the state has for fleets. Now, private companies are different, and I don't have their data. But I thought I'd start my presentation off with that. You asked for some suggestions, and there's different ways of looking at it. I can tell you from the standpoint of our Escape, we have a hybrid Escape, and we have a hybrid Mariner, which is the Mercury version. It's a small sport utility vehicle. Those vehicles do sell, in fact, for more than the regular gas-operated ones. They're somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 more, and there is a federal tax credit that the purchaser would get, and that's around $2,500 for that vehicle, and it's based on, again, a number of things, which I don't want to get into because I'm not an expert in terms of evaluating what the feds have done with their regs. So obviously we might want to take Ed's solution or suggestion, and that is to follow that because it has been well thought out and worked out. So what we're looking at is on our vehicle, if we get a $2,500 tax credit for our customer, the state can do its share, as someone mentioned up here earlier, that I think was Chairman Rice. What would the state be willing to offer a customer to get him into that kind of vehicle that gets better mileage versus its regular gas-operated counterpart? It also has better emission standards characteristics because, frankly, it's operating on an electric motor for part of the time. So those are two key things, and my suggestion would be, and I've heard this from other legislators, which is very interesting, is that the state should perhaps consider looking at not having a sales tax, at least a state sales tax, on the sale of a true hybrid vehicle as it meets the standards that the feds have set up. So that's clearly one indication or one suggestion that I would make. The second one is, and obviously you have to look at that suggestion based on the cost to the state and the number of hybrid vehicles that in fact the state might sell. Another suggestion would be to look at what South Carolina has just done, and I have a copy of their bill for staff. And their procedure is very simple, and again it suggests what Ed has brought forward, and that is follow the federal standard and then give a percentage of the federal tax credit back as a state tax credit. And in South Carolina's case, it's 20%. So whatever their federal tax credit is, the state of South Carolina will give an additional 20%. It's clearly not as generous, and I think what Chairman Rice was looking at was the differential of cost between a regular gas version and a hybrid version. If you could get that closer to, it would obviously be an incentive for that customer. I'm not worried about the flipping portion of it, because I think the last gentleman just indicated that the vehicle will stay in Georgia and we'll probably get the benefit for it. So if we're serious about fuel economy, if we're serious about reducing foreign dependence on oil, or our dependence on foreign oil, then clearly, and certainly the emission characteristics by itself are very important. Our vehicles meet very strict emission standards. They're on the green list, which is a list that the federal government has put together, and they're among the cleanest in the world. Louisiana also has some information on converting vehicles to alternative fuel. Louisiana has also passed some legislation on that, and I will make sure I give a copy of what I have on that, and the staff can perhaps do a little more work on it. But I'm not as familiar with Louisiana as I am with the other states, South Carolina. Many of the states this year have, in fact, introduced legislation to do precisely what we're looking at. A lot of them have not passed it, but they're at least thinking about it, contemplating it, and in terms of at least the hybrid vehicles. Other states are looking at incentivizing alternative fuels, and I think one of the things I wanted to mention before I finish is that it's important to understand that the vehicles are going to be out there, and as Mike mentioned, Mike Kumpf, the infrastructure is very expensive. And my suggestion would be that there ought to be a way to incentivize to get the infrastructure there, perhaps for the mom and pop gas station, or the cost of putting in an additional pump. Mike talked about CNG. We're not doing much CNG anymore. There's certainly some applications in the commercial side of the business, but CNG is just not, unfortunately, proved to be a real alternative fuel all by itself. Although again, it's one measure, and again, you can't look at it as just there is no silver bullet. So CNG, and again, we talked about electric vehicles. Back in the 90s, electric vehicles were really key, and everybody thought that was the next great thing. And it gets back to the battery technology, I think, that we established in those days that just wasn't satisfactory to the consumer. And so we moved away from electric vehicles. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say, and I will leave the documents with the staff. And I don't have an answer on the question of the cost for the battery because I'm not into that area at this point. I mean, we don't have enough experience. We had the first, I think, compact SUV that had hybrid capability in the United States a year or two ago, and now there are others. So there's definitely going to be competition in that area. It's growing, and there is a difference. It's not a significant difference, perhaps, between the fuel economy of a hybrid versus a regular gas operated vehicle, but there is a difference. And in some cases, we're actually highlighting our hybrid vehicles for taxi cab use in the cities because that's where they get their best mileage, and that's where the most benefit in terms of emissions comes when that electric engine or electric motor is running, and the gas engine is not running, and so that's where you get your fuel economy. The characteristics of our Escape and Mariner are much higher fuel economy in the city versus highway. The EPA estimates are in the mid-30s for city and right around 30 for highway for that vehicle. So it's just opposite of what we all understand today, in that most of us get better fuel economy on the highway with our vehicles than we do in the city. And that's a characteristic of hybrid technology. So I'd be glad to try and answer some questions. I think a lot of them have been answered.
Okay, Chairman Rice.
Bob, on the replacement battery thing, it sounds to me like only in fleet operations where there's a fleet purchase going on is the battery replacement really a selling issue. My guess would be if I went out as just a common consumer, walked in, said I wanted to buy a hybrid, my only concern would be the price difference probably between the regular engine and a hybrid engine. Because most people, I don't think, sense that they're going to keep the car for 100,000 miles or whatever the battery replacement is. And I'm not sure what that is, to tell you the truth. Is it 100,000 miles, or is it 50, or is it whatever? Do you know?
I've heard lots of different things, just as the other folks have suggested. I've heard 4 to 5 years. I've heard 100,000 plus. It just at this point I do not have that information, and I'm not going to tell you something that I can't take to the bank. I mean, my credibility is important, and I really don't know. But I think we're looking in the range of 4 to 5 years with normal driving. Again, with the commercial use, it's a whole different ballgame because those vehicles have an awful lot of wear and tear. I can't believe we're out supporting the idea of putting these into taxi cab fleets unless they can stand the wear and tear of that commercial work. And we have fleets in San Francisco. We have fleets in New York. Miami is looking at buying 100,000 hybrid vehicles for the city. So, I mean, it's starting to spread, and I'm sure that they're looking at those. That particular aspect of it is the maintenance portion of it.
Follow-up question on that. So from your marketing surveys, things like that, the hybrid decision is really one based upon the price at the new car dealer, effectively. Would that be pretty much a true statement?
I think that's correct. I mean, I think if someone mentioned Clark Howard, and I think that he's saying that it's not a good deal because the price differential is such that it takes you 4 years to make up in gasoline what you would save. I would say, when you look at the things that the federal government has done, and you look at some of the things that the states are looking at, and what you're looking at, any narrowing of that margin will probably push that decision in the favor of the hybrid, especially if it's available. And when gas was $2.25 a gallon, the hybrid vehicles were not selling as well. Today, they're selling very well. And so, I mean, if the mayor of Miami wanted 1,000, I'm not sure we could find him 1,000. But
what percentage of your vehicle sales currently are hybrids, and what is anticipated from your standpoint?
It's not a huge percentage because the technology is so new and so expensive that we're going to bring it out to more vehicles, and our plans are to introduce more hybrids in 2008, probably more to the midsize vehicles. But it's extremely expensive technology, and I would say it's unfortunately it's not where we want it to be, but we're out there and we're doing it because there's a certain segment of the population that wants it. But as I said, you have to be careful if you're bringing out a vehicle that's more expensive that people are not going to buy when gasoline prices are lower. The business we're in is trying to figure out what people want. And a year and a half ago, they wanted everything we were making, except the hybrids and the small cars. Now it's just the opposite. So, our challenge is to bring out vehicles as quickly as possible that the customer wants.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Agrees.
I drive a truck that has today 299,000 miles, with about 30 more to go before I get 300,000. And thinking about hybrid and gas prices and such, one would be led to think that maybe it's time to change to another vehicle, one that gets better gas mileage. But at the same time, I realize that my truck's paid for and with no payments, and even though gas mileage is not as good, we're somewhat asking the government to incentivize folks to make a financial purchasing decision that may not be in the best, the best interest of the family. So I want to guard against that a little bit. But when I look at other new vehicles that are not hybrid, it seems like there are a lot of rebates involved and no interest financing for 5 years or more. Are there some of those as well with hybrids from the dealers and manufacturers?
I can tell you that there were incentives in place for hybrids from our standpoint when the vehicles were not moving as well as we'd like them to move. Today there doesn't need to be an incentive, and we're trying to close the gap between what the regular version costs versus the hybrid. I can't tell you what the true cost is to Ford, but I can tell you that from our standpoint, it's important for us to have vehicles that people want that are environmentally friendly. And we're doing it at a premium to Ford Motor Company. I'll just say that.
Chairman Rice.
Two things. Are hybrids warranted in the same fashion as a normal?
Yeah, you would have the same base warranty, and frankly, the question about the battery, I think that the battery warranty is even higher than the mileage warranty would be on a regular vehicle. So in other words, your battery would be warranted for reasonable use beyond. But again, it doesn't help the commercial vehicle, but it helps the citizens that buy it.
Right.
Okay. Representative Sitz.
When we consider this, we consider why Georgia should be in the business of incentivizing or not incentivizing hybrid vehicles. You ask the question, what's the benefit, what's the payback? You look at environmental impact on higher mileage vehicles. You look at lessening our dependency on foreign oil and so forth. Those are kind of the paybacks. And you look to quantify that. It all seems to come back to how can we use less fossil fuels to power our vehicles. And over time, given certain requirements for size and passenger space and payload and so forth, it gets back to how much value is the hybrid going to give me for a comparable size car. You had mentioned the Escape hybrid. It gets you about 30 miles to the gallon in the city. Do you know offhand, or could you estimate what a conventional vehicle would get you city miles for the same kind of payload, same kind of truck, same kind of?
In a city application, the V6 hybrid, the hybrid is a 4-cylinder engine with an electric motor, the one that we make. The city EPA estimate is I think 33 to 35 miles per gallon. for the hybrid. For the non-hybrid, if you're in a 4-cylinder, it's probably more in the 20 to 21 range for a city. In the V6, it's a little bit lower. It's probably 18 to 20.
Okay. So with your best attempt to compare apples to apples, you would compare 21, 22 to 33 generally?
Yeah.
Okay. I need to be able to quantify that in my mind to get a feel for what the payback is. 'Cause I think that's really what we're looking to.
I mean, from the characteristics of the emissions, which are tremendously better, and if the fuel economy wasn't much better, if we didn't achieve both of those, I guess we would say, why are we doing it? And I think there's a large enough difference between the two that it does but it helps folks make decisions to go that way. And there are lots of people that feel very serious about the environment and feel very serious about dependence on foreign oil. So they may want to make that commitment. And what we're saying is we're at the beginning of this technology run on this particular technology, and I've never said that we ought to do this forever. Maybe we ought to put a sunset in for 5 years to encourage the production of the vehicles and encourage people to buy them. I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's what the consumer wants, and that's so important. If we don't produce what they want, they're not going to buy it.
But I'm just trying to carry away from this meeting a feel for impact of hybrids. So would it be wrong for me to carry away a 40 to 50% increase in gas mileage for city driving for a hybrid over a comparable?
I would say 30 to 40%, sure.
Chairman Rice, follow up.
My question goes to why we need to do this. We already have a federal tax increase. You're telling us, I think what I've heard you say is, at least with Ford, you're selling all you can make right now. And so if we go ahead and incentivize this, how many more can you actually sell? Do you have any idea what the market will bear?
My crystal ball isn't quite working as well as it usually is, but I think right now, I think that if you'll talk to some of the dealers, they just don't have these vehicles on their stock. And so I think that we can sell more. And I know that the competitors that we compete with are going to be making more, and over different lines of vehicles. At some point, there will be pickup trucks that will have, if they're not hybrid technology, they'll have other technology to increase their gas mileage, because we're under new standards regarding trucks for fuel
I guess
economy.
my question goes to, let's say we put a sunset on something like this in a 3-year time frame. And, but if you're going to sell 60,000 of them in Georgia, let's say, in any event, why should we do it? I mean, why should people make that decision if you're going to sell all you can make anyway? It sounds like you can.
This is wishful thinking, but maybe the price of gas will come back down again after September 1st, which everybody's predicting. Maybe it won't. And so maybe there won't be the strong incentive financially from just a gas consumption situation to incentivize it. I don't know how many we would sell in Georgia. I mean, I don't know if DMV is here. I'm not sure that we would sell that many vehicles in Georgia if we had the hybrid availability. But again, I'm with you in terms of for a couple, 3 years, it certainly makes sense to incentivize it. Clearly, from the standpoint of environmental, from fuel consumption, and we did hear. I think the chairman mentioned that there was an article about the fact that we're going to be in trouble as far as meeting the numbers for our state implementation plan, and as Atlantic grows. We measure this in vehicle miles traveled, and we're doing all we can to make the vehicles cleaner, and this is just one more step in going even further than the federal emission standards regarding cars and trucks.
Just the last question, Bob. And I don't know if you got an answer to this. I would hope that DNR or somebody like that was here to answer the question from an EPA standpoint, but we've done this stuff before. What we've done is we've put buses on the highway that run empty in many cases because they're trying to meet an EPA target number to get the highway trust fund dollars released, which is their hammer to, incentivize us to do the right things from that standpoint. I guess my question is, how many more cars that are hybrid would it really take to impact the environmental issue in this state? I mean, certainly over the period of time we're talking about. If you can sell all you can make, how much can you really impact the standard?
I don't have a quantified answer for that. I think if you look at places like California and some of the northeastern states, they've adopted more stringent standards for auto emissions, and they've done it because they think that's the right policy decision to make. They're not concerned about the extra cost that the vehicles may bear to the consumer, perhaps the degradation in some fuel economy, going with a more stringent emission calibration that relates to California versus the feds. These are clearly public policy decisions that legislators like yourself make, and in their estimate, they think that they're going the right way, and they don't want to know what the quantification is. If you show if I were to show you a bar map of or a graph of federal emissions versus California emissions, and the two lines come very closely together, somebody might say, well, really, there's very little difference between the two. But in many cases, the legislators like yourself will make the decision to go with California emission standards. And we think that the feds have gone in the right direction, and are those standards are strong enough, and for lots of reasons, we think that the federal car is the way to go. But again, states have made those decisions on their own, and they want to be more stringent. That's their business. But clearly, anything that any of us can do individually to help the environment and reduce our dependency on the oil, anything we can do, I guess, is something. It's voluntary. And I don't have a hybrid Escape, but I have one that I can drive occasionally, and it's really a great vehicle, and it does get great mileage. I mean, it's just amazing.
Mr. I'd ask you ask DNR and the compliance people there, that question. I think that's something.
Thank you very much, Chairman Rice. And they were invited here to answer exactly those questions, and unfortunately, there's nobody here for that, because that is one of the main objectives. As noted earlier, we have 45 counties in our non-attainment zone, and if we could reduce that, and that 45 counties, I don't know if we can quantify it exactly, but the extra cost of fuel, if it's 10, 12 cents per gallon, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to the consumers of Georgia, just to comply there, and that's only on the cost of gasoline. We're also looking at the prohibitions of various things we can do in transportation. So that non-attainment zone is huge for the impact of the state of Georgia, and anything we can do to reduce it. And that is a good question. How many vehicles would it take to actually make an impact? And hopefully we'll get that from DNR in the future. Bob, one more question, and I think Chairman Rice touched on it, and we'll have some of the other car manufacturers. I've read a couple articles where the car manufacturers, as you say, they want to produce that which will be purchased. And there is a fear with all of these new models coming out in the next year or two in hybrids that all of a sudden will go from non-availability to a glut of vehicles, because several manufacturers will be producing several new vehicles at the same time. We went out and made a series of telephone calls over the last several weeks, with two exceptions out of about 30 car dealerships that do carry hybrid vehicles. I only found two that did not have vehicles on the lot, over the telephone anyway. They said I could walk up and purchase that day. So while they may not have 10 vehicles, apparently the availability is on the road. It's, there's some that said, well, we got a truck coming in next week. But do you have any comment about, would they be holding back vehicles? Are there's a concern about there being a glut on the market, and they'd be afraid to produce too many vehicles?
No, I don't think there's a glut, and I don't think anyone right now any of the manufacturers are worried about producing vehicles, because people want them. again, it's the idea of incentivizing them. We haven't touched on the flex fuel very much, and I know you want to talk about that. And I mentioned a little bit about the infrastructure for flex fuel. And flex fuel, again, is not just ethanol, biodiesel, whatever's out there. As I mentioned, the commitment by the companies to produce those vehicles is very strong, and it's not as technology intensive as a hybrid vehicle is concerned. You're basically taking a Ford F-150 and changing some of the calibration items and changing some of the components so that the vehicle can accept ethanol, and it's not a tremendous technical feat. It's costly because you have to change the way you're producing vehicles and start producing a whole nother batch, but it's not that costly, so it wouldn't be preventative. So those vehicles, again, are available today, and I'm trying to remember the quote was from the conference that I was at, was that 7% of 145 billion gallons of gasoline a year is a lot, and if ethanol could serve that particular percentage, that would help us a lot in terms of the things that we were interested in regarding the country's dependence on oil.
Okay, thank you very much. I just said Representative Roberts.
One quick question. Out in SLC, when Minnesota was in there talking about what all they had done for ethanol and the plants that they had going up, do you have any numbers as compared to the amount of flex vehicles you sell there as compared to the rest of the country?
Obviously, if the fuel is available, they're going to be more readily, willing to buy it. I don't have data in Minnesota, but I can tell you that we're looking at the corridor between Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Missouri, and there's actually been a ethanol corridor that's been established so that people can utilize ethanol in that area. And as you might well expect, in that part of the world, there's a lot of corn, and so there will be a lot more production of ethanol. We're in more of an infancy stage here, where just this morning I heard about a new ethanol plant going in somewhere, and I think it was in Middle Georgia, but they hadn't picked the location yet that was going to produce 40 million gallons a year, which is important. And we're looking at, I know Georgia Tech is looking at making ethanol from wood byproducts and other products. I mean, we're watching people in South America make ethanol from sugar. And I can tell you that in Florida, there are ethanol plants popping up here and there because the vehicles will be there. I mean, they're already there. I mean, before this started, Ford had over 1 million vehicles that could burn, that were flex fuel vehicles that could burn ethanol or gasoline. And this was before this all started within the last year.
Okay, and I think we have one more question.
Quick question. When you talk about a flex fuel vehicle, this is just for my basic education. You talk about ethanol burning vehicles. Are they burning, what percentage of ethanol are they burning? Is it a ethanol gas mix? Or
yes, it's a mix. We call it E85, okay. So it's 85% ethanol, 15% petroleum.
Really?
Yes. But you got to be careful in terms of using that particular fuel on vehicles. You can't use them across the board. You got to make sure that the vehicle that you have is calibrated to run E85. And we obviously are cautioning customers not to put E85 into a non-E85 calibrated vehicle. That's important.
I mean, I certainly understand. I put 10% ethanol in my vehicle frequently,
and it's fine.
Want to make sure we're talking about something that's predominantly ethanol, 80, 85.
I think most of the vehicles today can run a mixture up to 15% ethanol with gasoline. But and as you know, ethanol is now a major component of gasoline blending because MTBE is no longer allowed. It's illegal to put it in. So ethanol is already a component of gasoline, and there are folks in the ethanol corridor that I mentioned that want to run on E85, and so they would need a special vehicle to run on that.
Okay. Bob, thank you very much. We really appreciate the information. Next, we have Mr. Jay Allison from JM Family and Southeast Toyota. Thank you very much for coming up today.
Thank you for having us. One thing I need to make a clarification up front. We are Southeast Toyota and JM Family, for those of you who don't know us, we are not Toyota manufacturing. We do not build the vehicles. We have the exclusive importation and distributorship in the 5 Southeast states. So from our perspective, I'm going to share some information we've gotten from Toyota manufacturing, but by and large, ours are just, anecdotal from sales. Toyota has told us, and I believe they've told the industry and others, that their goal over the next, I believe somewhere within the next 10 years, and again, don't quote me on these numbers, but they do want to have a hybrid version of every product they have out there, including the new full-size Tundra truck that'll be coming out. It'll be rolling off the assembly line in San Antonio this fall. So the goal is, and Toyota has made a conscientious decision to produce hybrid. They're not, from my understanding, they're not getting into flex fuel vehicles. Hydrogen is a great thing they want to look at, but it's just way too volatile of a fuel right now. They're doing some studies with the federal government that maybe 20, 30 years down the road, maybe we'll have hydrogen vehicles. But their focus is on hybrid. They feel like that's where the technology is. They feel like, in addition, that not only do you get the fuel efficiency gains, but you get a much cleaner burning vehicle. For example, a Toyota Prius is 80% cleaner from a fuel emission standpoint than average gasoline burning engines. One of the things I did want to talk about is when you guys were asking the questions, and again, this is specifically where a Toyota Prius is concerned, the city efficiency is at 184% more efficient than your average 2004 new midsize vehicle. The highway efficiency is 72%, and your combined highway and city is 126% more efficient. So from a fuel efficiency standpoint, and you add that into the emissions being 80% lower, we believe that's a great gain. One of the questions that kept coming up, there were questions about, comparative numbers. And again, we'll give this to you from a miles per gallon. And again, this is a 2005 Prius against a 2004 average new midsize car. And I want to quantify this because the Prius was engineered to be more fuel efficient, less power than the 2 Lexus hybrids that originally came out, as well as the Toyota Highlander. Those were to give you V6 fuel efficiency, but V8 power, the 2 Lexus and the Toyota Highlander. So the Prius really is geared more towards efficiency, as will be the Camry, the 2007 Camry that they'll be rolling out next year. But on the Prius, it's 55 miles per gallon combined label. That's averaging the highway of 51 miles per gallon and the U.S. city of 60 miles per gallon. And that's where they get the 126% gain over a regular gasoline burning engine. For the Lexus, a 2006 Lexus RX 400H, which is the midsize SUV that Lexus makes, your city is 30 miles per gallon, so that's 86% increase over what Toyota and Lexus considers to be a comparable vehicle. 26 miles per gallon on the highway, and a combined 28 miles per gallon. And an average SUV, according to the numbers provided to me by Toyota, the combined would be 17.9 miles per gallon. And again, this is V8 power, but with a V6 power plant. So that's kind of, would like to keep it brief and happy to answer any questions that I can.
Okay. Gentleman Chairman, right? One more time.
It's the same question I asked
Sure.
Bob. Are you selling all you can get
We
from
are.
a supply standpoint?
We are. And
What's your projection of that?
the projection of the sales I don't have, because again, we've told Toyota we'll sell everything you give us. We are starting to see, it's not that sales are slowing down, but as Toyota is able to ramp up production, we're starting to see more availability on the car lots. It was there for a while. Not only were people paying a premium For a Prius, from a sticker standpoint, dealers were also tacking on additional dollars, markups, whatever you want to call it, and they were out there. You're starting to see that subside now because the Prius and the other hybrid vehicles are available.
In the buying decision, the Prius, let's just take the Prius or whatever other one you want to pick. The average price differential is $3,500, $4,000?
I believe on some of the Toyota or Lexus products, it can be as high as $6,000. That's what it was originally. That, again, it's starting to come down because as incentives are introduced, as production and supply go up, you start to see the price differential come back into a more normal setting. Okay. Our belief is that incentives will continue to educate consumers and drive additional demand. And from the standpoint, we work very closely with South Carolina in that legislation last year. I believe they chose not to sunset it. But again, each state, the federal government, et cetera, it all depends on what they believe their needs are.
Is the replacement of the battery any kind of a buying decision concern?
I don't believe it has been from a straight consumer perspective. I would agree on a fleet it is. I don't know the actual warranty or what the mileage is, but I believe it's somewhere between $120,000 to $150,000. I mean, excuse me, miles for. We need the incentives, of course. No, miles for the batteries. Right. I believe. But again, the technology, as Bob talked about, is changing so rapidly. We're already going into, we're already well into the second generation Prius. And that technology just changes and changes and changes because not only do the batteries recharge from a Toyota standpoint as the vehicle's moving in the gas-burning engine recharging it, there's also, and again, I am not an engineer, but I believe through the braking, et cetera, through different types of force, they're able to recharge the battery as well. But again, that technology is so new and it's just changing so rapidly that it's hard to pinpoint how long the battery will last and what the actual replacement cost will be.
Do you, from a selling standpoint, is the federal tax credit a big issue in terms of your ability to sell the car?
Well, not to, I sure don't want to sound pompous out here, but the Prius, you get the largest tax credit on the Prius, and we do believe that has been something that has helped us not only through the technology that's available in the Prius, but also because you get the higher tax credit. And that is one selling point. But again, I can ask 6 different people their purpose for buying a Toyota hybrid, and I'll get 6 different reasons. Some people do it for fuel efficiency. Some people do it because I think Leonardo DiCaprio or whatever his name is out in California drives one. I mean, it's one of those things. We have put them into fleet service in Broward County. The most interesting thing is if you fly into Fort Lauderdale Airport, they have several Priuses at the airport, and I actually saw one had pulled over somebody. And it's like, well, thankfully it wasn't a high-speed chase because I don't think they could have caught up to him. But they do have it in the fleet. Bob's right. We're finding in South Florida that they're reaching out. The city of Miami's reaching out to all the different automakers that they really want to put as many of them into their fleets as they can get.
It'd be interesting to know how many people who buy those cars can actually take advantage of the tax credit. I mean, 50% of the people in the nation don't pay any taxes on the income side anyway. And that goes to the sales tax issue that somebody mentioned out here, something along those lines as opposed to an income tax type of situation to broaden the base of potential buyers. But my assumption is that the price of the car, the hybrid level, is probably one that forces a buying decision only into a upper echelon tax bracket.
I think initially you saw that. I think it's starting to come down. The sales tax, we believe, is a good idea, particularly since we're based in Florida. We don't have state income tax. One of the things we want to do is we are speaking to our legislators and encouraging them to take a look at a sales tax rebate.
And as the alternative minimum tax gathers more people moving towards 2010, then that's going to be even less of an income-based tax credit on this type of thing will be even less of an incentive.
Could be.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the panel? Ed? No. I do have one question. I realize you don't represent the manufacturer, and I should have also asked Mr. Cucci this. is it perhaps a logical assumption that as production of hybrid vehicles increases, that like so many things, that the cost of the technology should start to decrease, and this gap that we have in the cost should decrease over future years as in production increases?
I think you're right. I think basic economic principles would indicate that the price of the technology will come down, and ultimately the price of the vehicle wouldn't necessarily come down. I'm not sure, but it would definitely flatten back out to where it would be that you might not see the price differential between a normal gasoline burning engine or gasoline burning vehicle and a hybrid vehicle.
Which would be another good reason to sunset or ramp down the incentive.
Could be, yes.
Until we know what the future will bring. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your time.
One follow-up question from the audience.
I can answer the median price.
Could I have you on the microphone, please, Mr. Parker?
Maybe as a consumer, I've spent a lot of time watching these things, and the man from Toyota can correct me, but right now it appears as though the Priuses are around $28,000. So to take the chairman's idea that it's for an upper income person, that's not true. It's a moderate family price vehicle, somewhere in around the $28,000 range for the Prius. And also, according to the Wall Street Journal, they track the amount of time that a vehicle stays on a lot, and the Prius's life expectancy on a car lot right now is 9 days, and it's in the upper level of vehicles that stay the shortest on a lot. When they first came out, you had to wait for them, and now they're staying on the lot about 9 days.
Okay, Mr. Setzer.
Do you know and this may be an answer for the previous gentleman. What's the tax credit you get on the Prius?
On the federal?
The federal tax credit, yeah.
It is, I believe it's $3,150.
$3,150.
But again, that'll start to decrease because Toyota's already hit the federal mandate of production of 60,000, and then they have a formula where that you start scaling that down.
So about $3,000 roughly.
About 3,000.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Wayne Reach, do you have anything to add, please?
Just here, Mr. Chairman, to support our client, Jay Austin.
Okay. Does Christine have anything to add? Okay. And Mr. Brian Guest?
My colleague Jim Grody has prepared comments. So
okay. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jim Grody with the Southern Environmental Law Center, and we're a nonprofit public interest law firm that works to preserve the South's wild places, livable communities, clean air, and clean water. I'm happy to be here today to support any and all efforts to make energy efficiency more affordable for the people of Georgia. A lot of what I was going to say has already been said, so I'm going to try to be brief on this. We've talked about the rising gas prices and the recent news of our ongoing air quality problems here in Georgia, and with the looming specter of global warming as well. It's clear that now is the time to be doing things to try to reduce our dependency on traditional fossil fuel sources. And so we support this kind of legislation. Right now, as best I can tell, and these numbers I haven't been able to, I don't know that these are exactly accurate, but it looks to me like over 40 states and the District of Columbia have some kind of incentive for either hybrids or alternative fuel vehicles or for other energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. And these range from tax rebates or tax credits to rebates for energy efficient home improvements. And I realize we're not here to talk about energy efficient home improvements, but I wanted to just mention that as well. There are, I think, at least 17 states that currently have a law on the books that provides some sort of tax incentive for hybrid and or alternative fuel vehicles. But my list does not include Minnesota, and it sounds like there is something there, so I think my list is probably incomplete. Georgia actually does have a tax credit right now for low emissions vehicles that use only alternative fuels, or for zero emissions fuels or zero emissions vehicles. That credit can be up to $5,000. That's a good start. But as a previous speaker mentioned, alternative fuels just aren't widely available to everybody. They're great for fleets, but for the average consumer, they're not a practical solution. And so we think that that credit is of limited value, and so we support expansion of that credit to hybrids, and to the extent that it becomes a question, any other new incentives for energy efficiency. And I want to close my remarks before I'm happy to take any questions, but I wanted to close my remarks with a little anecdotal evidence on the availability of hybrids. I actually just bought a Toyota Prius about a month and a half ago. I'm a satisfied new owner, and when I went in, I could have walked off of the lot with a Prius. When I actually bought my car, I wanted a particular model and a particular package and a particular color, and they didn't have that particular one readily available because it was a relatively low production option package. So I actually did wait a little bit for my particular vehicle, but I could have gotten one immediately had I wanted to. I think that as demand rises, the supply is going to rise to meet that demand, and I don't think that we need to worry about bumping it up against production limits. So I think this can have a very real impact. I also will say that my drive-off cost was around $26,000. So again, that is, I think, definitely affordable for a moderate income family. So those are all the prepared remarks I had. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Any questions? I do have one question. Would perhaps any of your clients or the people you work with be able to help us answer Chairman Rice's question? And my question is, what would the impact, how many vehicles might we want to have hybrid before we start seeing a viable impact on the emissions?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would point out that every vehicle has some impact, and one vehicle or a couple of vehicles could be the difference between going over the ozone limit on a particular day versus not going over. But I don't know the specific numbers. We would be happy to work with you to try to figure out if there is a way to find out those kinds of numbers.
That would be a good question. We'd appreciate it. Yes?
Mr. Chairman, again, these are figures that we got from Toyota, and this document was prepared back in May. And again, as the production
Excuse me, could I have you on the microphone, please? Just only for that, Jim. Thank you very much for your comment.
Thanks for being a great customer, too. Anytime I can make a sale, I will. Again, these numbers are they were in April, and this changes on a regular basis. As more and more hybrid vehicles are out there, these numbers change. But Toyota estimates that drivers of Toyota and Lexus hybrids have to date, and this was prepared in May, have saved more than 133 million gallons of gasoline. And I'm sorry, those numbers were as of January 31st, 2006. So they had that was 133 million gallons of gasoline. In addition, the hybrid drivers have also avoided emitting an estimated 900,000 metric tons of carbon monoxide and more than 3 million pounds of smog-forming gases. So that was just in those. What the actual numbers are, I would have to go back and find out how many vehicles those are, and that's across the U.S., not just in the Southeast. But also, Toyota on their website, they have a sign, and this is actually an electric billboard. It's a video of this electric billboard alongside the 405 freeway in El Segundo, California, that updates this running total every 4 seconds. So just from the number of Toyota vehicles out there. So, but those are some more specific numbers. I don't know if that helps or not.
It would help if we had the number of vehicles.
Vehicles. Okay, I'll work with that and get those.
I would appreciate that information. Mr. Gucci.
EPD has modeling information on what you're looking for, and I think Marlon Gottschalk is
that brings it down. Tom Bowler, I know you're here, but do you have any
I have no
comments?
comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Becky Riles, you're hiding in the corner. But
Hello, Mr. Chairman. No, I don't have any comments.
okay. Well, thank you very much. Well, we've gone through the list of everybody that signed up. Is there anybody that didn't sign up that would like to make a comment? Yes, sir, if you would,
Sure,
please.
if I could. Sure, I'm Paul Burks. I'm director of the Georgia Environmental Cities Authority, GEFA. And the State Energy Office is a part of our agency, GEFA. Normally what we do is water and sewer loans. We also have a state energy program at GEFA as well. But I wanted to make a comment if I could, and that is that the governor asked us several months ago to work on and develop a state energy strategy to be turned into him in December of this year. And we are working on that strategy. In the spring of this year, we took comments from the public on a variety of areas, had over 300 comments, and the comments, of course, included area that we're talking about today. We are now working on those comments to come up with a draft document to come out around September the 1st, and then in September, I'll be having public hearings again on those comments so that we can work on the fall. But I just want to let Mr. Chairman, you and the committee know that we are working on looking at these issues and don't have anything to tell you definitive today related to incentives, but it's one of the areas that the public did submit to us that they'd like for the state to consider, so we are working on that.
Well, excellent. We would certainly love to work with you because this whole thing is a multifaceted problem with a multifaceted solution. We're looking at emissions. We're looking at, of course, the gas efficiency, but I think the emissions control is a huge impact on the state, and I think it's one of the things that I'm really looking at as a result from this, besides providing consumers with vehicles that will be more efficient for them. So I think we're looking at all angles, and whenever we can cooperate and work with an overall energy solution, I think that's exactly where we should be going, where responsibilities lie. So I'd love to work with you directly, provide you any information, and hopefully exchange things.
Love to work with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody on the panel, those that are left today, and everybody that provided the information. This has given us a tremendous start on where we'd want to go and working with the program for what the governor's going to be looking for on an energy program. I think we might come up with some legislation that would be beneficial to the consumers and to the state this year. And if we do not have all of your, I think we have all of your contact information. If not, if you provide it as we go forward, we may have direct questions, and please feel free to contact my office at any time. Thank you very much for being here.
Good job, Kelly.
Good start.
Good job.
Appreciate it.